What reason do I have to buy these loot boxes? What reason do I have to lob my balls into that guy's face? Hell, what reason do I even have to log into the game in the first place? We don't just do things for the heck of it. No, there are usually reasons behind our actions. They're not always good reasons, but reasons nonetheless. Reasons that game developers either take advantage of or create for us in the first place. That's right, my friends, today I want to talk about incentives. Incentives in video games are a very important tool that lead players towards many different things. Incentives can convince us to play the game in a certain way. Incentives can encourage us to not just do the same thing all the time. And incentives play a big role in maintaining a healthy level of player retention. Ask yourself the following. When you queue into a match of Overwatch, what reason do you have to fight the opposition? Why do you go out of your way to hold down these W and M1 buttons in an attempt to bring bloody vengeance upon your foes? What kind of a stupid question is that, you might say? It's to win the game. That's the whole point of it. That's how you play Overwatch. And that is exactly right. This is what we call a gameplay loop. Every game makes us do a certain number of things over and over again as part of its core design. When players talk about gameplay variety, they often don't consider that core gameplay loop because it is an inherent part of the game that you simply can't get rid of. As a Fortnite player, you might say that the game offers more variety to you than Overwatch because you keep ending up in different areas, having different kinds of weaponry, building different structures, and fighting different enemies. On paper, that sounds like no match of Fortnite is ever like another, but if you stop to think about it, you are doing the same things over and over again. You jump out of the bus, you collect weapons, and you fight other players while taking advantage of the building mechanic. This is the core gameplay loop of Fortnite. And Overwatch is no different, it really just depends on how you lay it out. Sure, we could again say that no match of Overwatch ever feels like another because we keep playing different maps with different players, maining different heroes. And it feels especially different when we decide to play other heroes ourselves. But at the end of the day, we are fighting over capture points, payloads, and our own sanity. The gameplay loop of Overwatch demands that we are playing against each other for an objective, and the core design suggests that we should be using everything the game offers to achieve that goal. But this is where we get to our first lack of incentives, because the game never incentivizes players to do any of that. While common sense might suggest that the incentive to switch off of our heroes is to increase our chances to win, since winning is the whole point of the game, the reality looks a little different than that. Because in competitive play, what the game cares about is our own performance. To be exact, how consistently we can perform across multiple matches. It finds our average performance and determines the rank we are supposed to be in based on that data. That means that we have a very real reason to not switch off of our characters to increase our chances to win. That incentive is keeping our MMR high. Because despite popular belief, a lot of competitive players don't play ranked to win their respective match. They participate on ladder to climb. Now, we have talked about how that is a terrible mindset to have and how the competition itself and our own improvement should be the focus over shiny emblems. But that's just not how it plays out in the game. Our incentive to participate in competitive play consists not of winning our matches, but gathering competitive points for golden guns while reaching higher and higher ranks to validate our own self-worth and gain more bragging rights. And that is a very difficult problem to fix, because if you take any of these incentives away, why would players participate on ladder at all? Sure, you might have your top 1% of hardcore players who just wanna win, but without shiny incentives to get players started in the first place, your competitive mode is going to end up dead in no time. So what other incentives are there in Overwatch? Well, the incentive of loot does not last very long for a highly active player. Assuming you didn't care about competitive play and only spent your time in the arcade and quick play, you could potentially be free of the incentives that are suggested by the competitive system. If you're not playing for a rank, you might be someone who really just wants to win the game, or you enjoy the core gameplay loop whether you win or not. At this point, the desire to win can come from the wish to want to acquire more loot. But given that the pool of items in the game is open from the very beginning and completely random, the higher your level, the lower the chance of a player still giving a damn about being granted loot boxes for leveling up. Loot as an overarching incentive does not work very well when the items you are given don't interest you. Why am I going out of my way to slay some massive elite monster in World of Warcraft? Well, of course the core gameplay loop of me playing my class is very fun, but during the leveling process I do it to gain XP. I gain XP to reach max level, and once I'm there, I'm slaying these things to get loot. But the loot in WoW has a purpose. The gear I'm collecting increases my power level, allowing me to participate in more difficult types of content. In fact, most of the loot in the game serves some kind of purpose, and every player can choose which path they want to pursue. You can clear older content to gather cosmetic items for transmog, or you can clear current content to increase your power level. The loot in the game has purpose. But in Overwatch, the lack of a meaningful progression system means that the act of opening loot boxes becomes very unsatisfying very quickly. There's no way for us to specifically work towards an item that we want. It's all tied to RNG, and RNG is a terrible incentive. And the last or current Summer Games event, depending on when you're watching this video, has also given us no reason to assume that new incentives are going to be added to the game. You see, no single incentive can keep us engaged indefinitely. That's why it's important to keep adding new ones. Once you gathered every item you are interested in, loot boxes lose their appeal. Once you have reached your skill cap and don't manage to rank up anymore, ladder play loses its appeal as well. With no other underlying incentives to play the game, the repetitive nature of any core gameplay loop in any game becomes very apparent. And make no mistake, this is not Overwatch exclusive. Games are repetitive by nature. It just depends on whether or not the repetitive act is fun to us. But even if it is, all the incentives in the game are there so that we never realize how repetitive the game actually is. Because once we start realizing that, we lose interest in it. But some of you guys probably know me too well by now. I would not start talking about incentives in gaming for the sake of it. And you're right, there was a catalyst that sparked the idea for this topic. In my video talking about seasonal events in Overwatch, I have criticized the dev team's choice to recycle their content and suggested a reimagination of the idea of ongoing events in Overwatch. And this is a follow-up to that video. I suggested that Blizzard should rather focus on an ongoing narrative that pushes their story forward, over repeating the same events year after year while merely giving us flashbacks of what happened in the past once a year during the Overwatch Archives event. And I hope that you understand now why I proposed that idea, because an evolving narrative creates an incentive for players to keep coming back. Seasonal events can be a nice addition to an already fleshed out update cycle that brings new, meaningful content into the game. But seasonal events themselves should never be seen as major content drops, because as we have discussed in that video, they're not. They are not creating meaningful incentives for players to come back and keep playing the game. And the reason I find it important to talk about this is because we need ideas like these floating around. Everyone can cry about finding the new skins ugly while complaining that ranked is broken, but none of these comments give meaningful insights to the development team. I want Overwatch to be around for a long time to come, and it is my belief that the way they are currently handling their IP is not going to achieve that. They are putting a lot of resources into the esports scene while neglecting the game itself, and that, I believe, needs to be addressed. But hey, why should I be the only one throwing ideas around? What do you think? Should they focus on adding meaningful incentives to the game to keep players engaged? Or should they try to push competitive players as hard as they can to get the esports scene into a good place? I'd be curious to find out what you guys think. But until then, thank you everybody so much for watching. Don't forget to drop me a like on your way out if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and maybe share this video with a friend you think will find it interesting. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you all next time.